In Romans 12, Paul writes, I appeal to you, brothers and sisters, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Verse 2, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. It is our prayer and our desire that all those involved in our next generation ministry here at Southside live out their faith. We want them to be leaders and to help spread the good news of Jesus Christ in their schools, on their teams, and in their communities. And the way you do that is to live lives that represent and represent the gospel, to live according to biblical standards, or as Paul writes in verse 2, to not be conformed to the patterns of this world. But I think it's interesting, he writes that in verse 2, but first in verse 1, he shows us that true spiritual worship is what leads us to not being conformed. While many of us worship in this space, we also offer age-appropriate next-generation worship for each developmental phase. Pre-K worship introduces worship concepts during a really developmental period of children's lives. Kid worship allows children to experience and engage all the same elements that their parents are experiencing in worship, but just for their age level, which helps them grow more in their faith. Students get to experience worship in an intimate setting with their community, which allows worship to become real and penetrate their hearts and their lives at a time they really need it. And we've also recently started offering an English next generation service at the Southside Korean Baptist Church to allow their next generation to worship and praise God in their heart language. All of these worship gatherings combine to form Southside's unique expression of worship. The Bible is clear that one of the few things we will be doing in heaven is worshiping. If it is important enough that life in heaven revolves around it, we want to make sure we help our children from a young age learn to worship and praise their Lord.